Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lee Perez, spelled L-E-E-P-E-R-E-Z, and I'm an ESL teacher in Omaha, Nebraska for the Omaha Public Schools District. I've been an ESL teacher for 18 years, and I'm here to testify in support of LB411. Currently in Nebraska, we are seeing a teacher shortage across all school districts. This has had a profoundly negative impact on our schools, communities, and most importantly, our students that we serve daily. Retaining teachers should not only be the job of our local school boards and superintendents, but our elected government officials. While teachers do not go into this noble and important profession for the economic incentives, that does not mean that teachers should struggle to pay for basic necessities or work multiple jobs to pay their bills. It is long overdue to economically reward all teachers in Nebraska for the incredible things they achieve daily. While thank yous and teacher appreciation days are nice, they do not pay for a mortgage, food, utilities, or a car payment. LB411 would be a way to appreciate Nebraska teachers and retain them long-term in Nebraska. When teachers are rewarded financially, the investment is that we keep our best and brightest teaching here, which in turn leads to positive outcomes for our Nebraska students. For example, from 2020 to 2024, Omaha Public Schools saw 1,779 teachers leave the profession, with the average being 600 teachers leaving in a 3-year span. However, in 2024, significant pay raises were given, and the average dropped from 600 teachers leaving to just under 130. Thus proving that paying teachers and giving them bonuses retains them long-term. For these reasons, I support LB411, and I'm happy to answer any questions at this time, and below are the sources for the data and statistics I just gave you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Perez? Senator Meyer.
Thank you, Chairman Berman. This is probably totally unfair of me to ask you this question. I should have asked it with President Royers. We're asking for an increase of pay for teachers, and yet we see our test scores go down. Should we be considering looking at elevating salaries based on outcome?
No.
Why not?
Because for example, in my district, so Omaha Public Schools has put on we're classified under the state as needs improvement. Over half of our students, 50%, are English language learners. So there are students that come to this country that don't speak any English, so they take a multitude of standardized tests, and to nobody's surprise, they don't do very well. That's not really...
I recognize that, and one thing we all have to take into consideration is when we take standardized tests, many classrooms are starting from different levels, and so you may not have a really good test score at the end of the year testing, but you might have done a great job depending on where you started from. So I'm not trying to throw teachers under the bus here. It's almost impossible to compare districts because classes based on demographics start in different places.
Correct.
And yet we're seeing across the board, on average, our test scores come down. And I don't think throwing money at it, and once again, I want teachers to be paid as much as we possibly can. As I mentioned before, I'm married to a retired teacher, and I understand that argument quite well. But as we throw more money at schools and we see our results come down, I have a hard time squaring that circle, and I fully appreciate it's almost impossible to gauge progress because we're not all starting at the same point. So how do we square that circle?
It's a really good question, but I will say if you ever want to have a conversation about test scores, I'm actually a published author. I actually wrote about this in a book about English language learners and why it takes them so long to learn English and master proficiency on a test score. But with all due respect, sir, I don't really think that bill really addresses that. What I will say is that if you look at what's happening in Nebraska, it's not naive or ignorant thinking to think that we are facing a crisis that if we continue to ignore this, it might get worse. I mean, for example, in 2022, the governor of New Mexico called in the National Guard because things got so bad. I mean, do we really want that to happen before we could have said, geez, we could have been super proactive and we could have fixed this problem before it happened? And here, let me just read some other statistics for you, okay? So in other states where they have given, if I may, if that's okay, if I may just read these statistics.
All right, Chairman Merman.
Sure.
If that's okay, if I may. In North Carolina, a study in high areas such as math, science, and special education, and in high poverty schools where test scores are lower, they gave teachers annual bonuses, I think of up to like a 2 or 3 year span of $1,800. And it reduced teacher turnover by 17% in the state of North Carolina. In Florida, another study looked at some of the same high-level areas such as science, math, special education, English language learners, TESOL, whatever language acronym you want to use, and they gave $1,200 to middle and high school teachers in those areas, and they found that it reduced teacher reduction by 25%.
What outcome?
I mean, I don't really have any statistics on that, but, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is really, the studies really looked at keeping people in the classroom, because if you don't have I guess my point is this, like, if you look at the state of New Mexico, the problem got so bad, they called in the National Guard. So now you're literally losing people that are actually certified in that craft and bringing in people that have no teaching experience. Do you honestly think that the outcome would be any better?
And I apologize for putting you in a bad spot. I should have had that for.
No, I'll answer any question you want.
But, and I'm not trying to hold teacher pay down, and one of the most difficult jobs we have in Nebraska is teaching. I have the utmost respect for all teachers. Please understand that.
Thank you.
And yet, outcome, the United States is #1 in per pupil spending and #40 in developed nations in educational proficiency. I have a hard time digesting that, quite frankly, and we have to do better. I'm open to suggestions, but certainly paying teachers to retain them, I'm on board. I have no problem with that. Fiscally, with where we're at financially with the state, it's essentially almost an impossibility. So once again, throwing money at something and not getting outcome is just a really hard sell for me. And that's all I've got. But I really respect the job you do. You guys have an extremely difficult job. I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. So,
A lot of us don't know,
yeah.
honestly, sir.
I appreciate your time, and once again, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Linescu.
Thank you, Chair Berman, and thank you for being here. My daughter's an ELL teacher.
Oh, yes,
and
yes.
So,
So she can tell you how, it's,
so do you recommend tying the bonuses to critical areas?
yeah, I think in shortage areas, like, for example, it's gotten so bad that our Rule 24 with the Nebraska Department of Education, July 19th of last year, basically they're saying anybody with a teaching certificate now, an initial teaching certificate, can take the Praxis 2, which is the content area exam, specifically in shortage areas such as math, science, high need areas, and then they're certified to teach that subject without taking any college approved courses from any of the 16 institutions that we have. I will say this, 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, even 5 years ago, that would have not even been an option, but now that just kind of gives you a preview of how bad the shortage is in math, science, special education, things of that nature, is that they're willing to literally negate college level content area courses. And if you got lucky to take some tests, so if I went in and I took biology and I somehow miraculously passed it, which I probably wouldn't, I could then teach biology or math, So, I mean, that just, Rule 24, the amendment to that through the Department of Education just kind of shows how dire this is.
Okay, and then I'm thinking outside the box here. Would you recommend tying any of these bonuses to student loan repayment program? Or
Again, that I don't know. You'd have to ask the crafter of this bill, but I'm not really sure how the parallels with student loans would work. I'm just here to testify on specifically what I saw in my district when the school board and the superintendent approved these massive pay raises, especially for veteran teachers. Let me give you an example. I knew teachers that were actually getting ready and were on the cusp of retirement. And after these bonuses were passed and these salary hikes were passed, they said, I've decided to stay another 5 to 10 years. So that's 5 to 10 years that we don't have to look for a veteran teacher. Because as you've seen, if you ask anybody in the state at any teacher preparation institute, not just in Nebraska and in the nation, their numbers have declined anywhere from 5 to 25%. So the fact that we were able to keep more teachers, specifically veteran teachers, in the field for another 5 to 10 years is a game changer.
Thank you.
I don't know if that answered your question.
No, I didn't mean to put
That's
you on the
my
spot.
TED Talk, so.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot with the other part, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Senator Juarez?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lopez, for being here. I have just a couple questions. I couldn't remember, what was the second state that you mentioned after North Carolina on your stats? Was it Florida?
It was Florida.
Okay.
So if you want me to read, this comes from a source called the 74, and the title of the article is Why Teacher Pay Matters, Recruitment and Retention Can Improve Results. And so if I may, Senator Juarez, it's good to see you. If I could just read the first couple lines verbatim, if you'll just bear with me. It says, Florida, another study looked at 1,200, about 1,700 adjusted for inflation, retention bonuses given to middle or high school teachers in certain subject. The research found even more pronounced results. Teachers who received the relatively modest payments were about 25% less likely to quit than similar teachers who didn't receive the pay bump or bonuses. That's what it says, end quote.
Okay, and so I was curious, because you teach English second language.
ESL, yes, correct.
Correct? Okay. I'm sure that in the years that you've been teaching, you can really see the challenges that students have with their transition, of coming into our school system, correct?
Yes.
And wouldn't you say that trying to address the outcome is definitely a complex one? I mean, I served on the school board, and that's how I felt. We want to put the onus on the teachers, and it's just not up to them.
Right.
I mean, I feel that, it's a family issue. Their parents might not be at home helping them because they might be out working 2 or 3 jobs just trying to survive.
Correct.
I mean, there's a lot to it, just being in the classroom. Would you agree?
Yeah, oh, yes, absolutely. In addition to like the language barrier, and I've testified before on my expertise on multilingual learners and why it takes them so long to reach English proficiency and how that correlates to low test scores. And I will say this, it doesn't matter what part of Nebraska you go to, and you're starting to see an influx of these students going to rural Nebraska. And it's by no fault of the students. It takes 7 to 10 to 12 years to master language good enough to perform well on a proficient test. It's called academic language. Any district or any superintendent or school board will tell you that English language learner scores are going to be traditionally lower than those of their native speakers. And that's just one obstacle that we as teachers face, in addition to all the other ones that you just mentioned, Senator Juarez. And that's not just Omaha Public Schools, by the way.
I have one more question,
Sure.
please. So I know that you try to interact with Latino students at college.
Correct.
To try to encourage them to be teachers.
Yes.
Wouldn't you find that these particular bills that we've looked at today would be something that would definitely attract them to definitely consider going forward with their career choice?
Yes, I've had former students of mine that have considered becoming teachers, and the number 2 things that they have mentioned to me are pay and safety nets. And literally what we are discussing today with LB440 and LB411 are literally 2 things that could literally remove a barrier to where people that are leaving high school would say, oh, wow, look at what's going on in education right now. I'm going to be financially set. I'm going to have safety networks there just in case I were to get sick, or my father was to get put in hospice care, my mother were to get cancer, or I was able to start a family. Those are 2 huge barriers as to why people are not entering the profession at this point, or in addition to that, actually leaving the profession and going into the private sector of the economy.
And one other side comment I'd like to make is it'd be nice with the salary that we pay to our Nebraska football coaches if we tied their performance and their pay too. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Juarez. Good to see you too.
The question I came up with, you talked about teacher retention.
Yes.
Studies I've seen, a big part of, a big obstacle for teacher retention is behavior in the classroom. So I'm surprised you said pay and safety net.
Well, I mean,
I've
here's
seen it's
the
further
thing,
down
like,
the line.
I deal with a lot of issues in the classroom, but now that I'm making more money, I'm willing to, teachers are more willing to put up with those issues and work with those kids and work with the schools to help address some of the trauma and stuff that we're seeing. And as you can see, this is not just confined. Other studies have shown in states that are having some of the same issues, the minute they pay them or give them bonuses or hike them on the salary step, magically, teachers are actually staying in professions and rolling up their sleeves, and they're more willing to work with some of the challenges that those schools offer. So I guess my point is this, is, you know, paying them actually goes a long way, it really does. And from what you've seen the data with my school district, you know, we went from, in 3 years, the average number of teachers leaving Omaha Public Schools was 600, which, by the way, that is a lot, to in 2024, and again, the sources are on this testimony. I encourage you all in this committee to look at that. We went from that to losing only 130, and I will say that many of those teachers that had left the Omaha Public Schools, once the pay raises came out, they had rescinded their resignations and came back because of the money. So that 130, that number is actually lower. And there's a school board member behind me that's willing to testify that, yes, the raises and the bonuses absolutely helped keep and retain teachers in Omaha Public Schools long-term, and that is huge. And I guess the crux of my message is that could work statewide.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Not, thank you.
All right, thank you.